Dear students, welcome to the third and final video lecture of session 6. Here we will understand strategy and structure in multinational firms. First, strategy in multinational firms. Here we will briefly review decisions taken at both the headquarters and at the subsidiary levels. The objective of a multinational firm's strategy is to integrate its global operations in such a way that it leverages organizational resources and capabilities of its different subsidiaries and location-specific advantages of its different host economies. Second, it minimizes the risks on both demand and supply sides. And third, it gains competitive advantage over other firms and entrants. Let me illustrate it through the case of QME. QME's Indian unit had capabilities in design and application technologies, whereas its Russian unit had capabilities in large-scale production. By integrating the capabilities and operations of the two units, QME gained a competitive advantage in the global markets. Similarly, QME's Chinese operations were to leverage China's location-specific advantage, namely the supply of raw material, lower cost of production, and access to its huge market. By operating in multiple large markets, QME lowered its dependence on a single market and the risks associated with it. Multiple sources of raw material from Russia, South Africa, and China also lowered QME's risks on supply side. Indeed, it could survive an increased price of zirconia because it was sourcing other raw materials from Russia and China. Finally, by operating in multiple countries in a coordinated manner, QME strengthened its competitive position in India and in the world. For instance, learning in China decreased the threats to QME in Indian market from a competitor or an entrant operating in China and enjoying lower costs. Thus, you can see that QME's strategy was pursuing all the above mentioned objectives. In a multinational firm, strategic decisions are made at two levels, at headquarters and at the subsidiaries. Headquarters take three primary strategic decisions. First, it defines firm's objectives and scope and identifies and develops the necessary resources and capabilities. Second, it configures and coordinates strategies and operations of the subsidiaries. And third, it allocates value activities across organizations and geographies. Now let us try to understand these tasks in some detail. Headquarters' first task is to define firm strategic objectives, organizational scope, and resource base. What is firm strategic positioning? That is, in which industries and geographical markets it operates and which customer segments it targets. Headquarters plays a key role in setting firms' performance goals in terms of sales and financial and operational targets. It also identifies the relevant resources and capabilities necessary to achieve firms' objectives and devise strategies to generate, develop, and acquire them. A firm establishes foreign subsidiaries and the headquarters determines their mandate, depending on whether the firm went to foreign economies seeking for markets, efficiency, or strategic resources such as technological knowledge. The headquarters exercises control over the subsidiaries so that their strategic choices, operations, and financial performance are all in line with firm's overall strategy and performance goals. The headquarters coordinates activities of different subsidiaries, designing flows of products, knowledge, and human capital, etc. between them. A headquarters' third key task is to allocate value activities across organizations and geographies. If a certain host country has a competitive advantage over the home country in doing a value activity, the firm would offshore that activity to its subsidiary in that economy. For example, many American and European electronics companies offshored manufacturing to their units in countries like China, Taiwan, and Malaysia. Similarly, if another organization can do a value activity at a lower cost or can achieve higher quality, the headquarters would outsource that activity to another firm, provided that the activity is strategically a non-core activity for the firm. For example, you might have heard that many airlines and banks have outsourced their customer care activities to business process outsourcing or BPO firms in countries like India and Philippines. Now let us look at the strategic decision making at the subsidiary level. A subsidiary is owned by at least one parent firm. So it is simultaneously pursuing not only its own goals as an organization, but also that of its parents or owners. Further, a subsidiary can access and deploy not only its own resources and capabilities, but also that of its parents and their other subsidiaries and network firms. Now, a note on subsidiaries' performance. A parent firm assesses the performance of a subsidiary by financial indicators or non-financial, that is, strategic indicators. Profit, return on investment, and revenue growth, etc., are some financial indicators. Depending on the mandate of subsidiary, a parent firm can evaluate subsidiaries' performance in terms of learning, strategic fit with other operations, options value, that is, whether the subsidiary reduces the overall supply side or demand side risks for the firm, and competitive repercussions. For instance, a firm often enters the home market or key markets of their rivals as it softens rivalry and rivals' offensive in other markets. That is why you may have heard that many electronics and automobile firms from US entered Japan in 80s and 90s despite not making much money in the Japanese market. Whether a firm emphasizes financial or strategic performance indicators depends on many factors. It may also give more importance to different sets of indicators at different times. For instance, in early stages of subsidiary development, the firm may emphasize market share and learning, whereas in the later stages, it may focus more on profitability. A multinational firm often divests or dissolves an underperforming subsidiary. In this slide, I have listed the factors which affect primacy of financial versus strategic control. Firms emphasize financial control over their subsidiaries in the following cases. First, when a firm has made a market-seeking or efficiency-seeking FDI. Here, the objective is to increase revenues or decrease costs, which can be easily captured through financial measures. Second, when a subsidiary is located in a developed economy. Normally, markets pre-exist in such economies and the customers have high purchasing power. So firms can expect financial gains from such subsidiaries. Third, when a firm has minority stakes in a subsidiary. The firm doesn't have necessary strategic control over such subsidiaries and therefore its strategic gains from them are limited. Fourth, in the later stages of subsidiary development. By now, the firm expects financial returns as subsidiaries' resources and capabilities are developed, and it has gained knowledge about the local markets. And fifth, when there are high risks or uncertainty in the local country. In this case, a firm wants to recuperate its investments as soon as possible. A firm emphasizes strategic performance when it has made resource-seeking FDI. Such a subsidiary creates positive externalities for the firm as a whole. You can think of Asian and European technology firms going to Silicon Valley for R&D and leveraging its knowledge networks. Second, when the subsidiary operates in a developing economy. In this case, the firm has a long-term view of opportunities. Third, when the firm has a majority stake in the subsidiary, which allows it to have a strategic control over the operations and make it useful for the performance of the firm as a whole. And fourth, when a subsidiary is in the initial stages of development. In the beginning, a subsidiary faces lower financial performance because of its lack of knowledge about the foreign conditions. However, at this stage, it gains substantially in terms of learning and network. Now let me explain how strategic orientation of a multinational firm affects its organizational structure. A multinational firm faces two competing pressures. First, to integrate its global operations so that it can create synergies and economies of scale, that is, lower costs. And second, to respond to the local market conditions so that the subsidiaries perform well in the host countries. How a multinational firm responds to these competing pressures depends upon its strategic orientation, that is, how it competes, whether on prices or differentiation, and on the nature of industry. For example, some industries like FMCG require more product adaptation to the local markets, whereas others like electronics and telecommunications require less product adaptation by countries and may opt for globally integrated product development and production activities. In this slide, you can see a 2x2 matrix using the pressures of national responsiveness and global integration as axes. Multinational firms follow four types of strategy based on whether their subsidiaries are differentiated and locally adapted, as on y-axis, and whether they're integrated to parent firms' global operations, as on x-axis. When a firm scores low on both counts, it is following international strategy. When the subsidiaries are highly differentiated and locally adapted, but they are not integrated with firm's global operations, then the firm is following a multi-domestic strategy. If the subsidiaries are highly integrated to parent's global operations, but are not differentiated or locally adapted, the firm is following global strategy. And at the end, if the subsidiaries score high on both counts, the firm is following a transnational strategy. Let us learn more about these strategic orientations in a little bit of detail and observe the organizational structure of firms following these strategies. Let us first understand international strategy. It is followed by firms which have recently started venturing out to foreign markets. They are ethnocentric organizations. That means their product, strategy, and organizational structure are focused to their home country conditions. Home country markets account for much of their revenues. Their subsidiaries are primarily sales organizations which offer products without much local adaptation. Operations of subsidiaries are not integrated to one another. These organizations are structured primarily by functions or product divisions, with an international unit looking after the foreign operations. We can take the examples of American and Japanese electronics and pharmaceutical companies, which started with exporting and in the early days of internationalization made FDI in promising markets but kept selling the same products they sold in their home country markets. Here, we see the organizational structure of Starbucks in its early days of international expansion. As you can see, it was organized by functions, and the Starbucks Coffee International was looking over its foreign operations. Now let us look at the firms following multi-domestic strategy. Their subsidiaries are locally adapted and focus on their host country markets like purely domestic firms. The subsidiaries are highly autonomous and create little synergies with parents' operations in other countries. So each subsidiary engages in its own product development and production activities, leading to duplication of efforts and scale disadvantages. Such multinationals are organized by geographical units. Many FMCG companies like Unilever and Nestle have traditionally followed multi-domestic strategy. In 1960s and 70s, Philips followed the same strategy. Here we have taken the case of McDonald's, which adapts its operations and offerings significantly to the local demands. Operations of McDonald's India is not much integrated to the operations of McDonald's USA, Singapore, or Israel. Now let us look at the firms following global strategy. These firms are highly centralized, with decision-making concentrated at the headquarters and low autonomy given to their subsidiaries. The headquarters takes decisions about firms' R&D, product development and production, and allocates value activities globally, thereby reaping substantial scale advantages. Production takes place at a few locations, and the products are subsequently exported to various markets. Thus, firms' product offerings are standardized rather than adapted specifically to the local markets. Global strategic orientation is common in many high-tech industries that don't require local adaptation of the products. You will notice that in our given case this week, Philips versus Matsushita, the latter follows global strategy. Here we have taken the example of Airbus, which has three differentiated product divisions. Each division allocates value activities globally in line with site's country-specific advantages. Aircraft sold by Airbus to a French airline are not different from those sold to a Malaysian or an Ethiopian airline. At the end, let us talk about firms following transnational strategy. These firms are differentiated networks of locally adapted subsidiaries. Transnational firms design coordinated flows of products and knowledge among subsidiaries with specialized organization-specific and location-specific advantages. The flows are both vertical, that is, between the headquarters and the subsidiaries, and horizontal, that is, between the subsidiaries. Compared to firms following global strategy, in transnational firms, subsidiaries exhibit relatively lower dependence on headquarters and higher subsidiary interdependence. In more recent times, technology firms are increasingly trying to adopt transnational strategy. In this picture, we show the case of Philips. The connecting lines depict interlinkages between different subsidiary organizations. It seems that subsidiaries collaborated and traded with one another. For example, Philips Japan had linkages with Philips organizations based in Holland, US, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, and the UK. Thus, Philips in 1990 looked more like a network of differentiated subsidiaries connected with one another. Firms following transnational strategy often have a matrix organizational structure, which is characterized by dual hierarchies, means two hierarchies. Managers simultaneously report to supervisors from their global product division and their country organizations. Global product divisions integrate and coordinate activities across subsidiaries and provided product-related and technical support to their managers in subsidiaries. Country organizations give the market-related inputs to their managers and help them perform better in the host country markets. You will understand better with this example. Here we have taken the example of Swiss-Swedish company called ABB. It is headquartered in Zurich, Switzerland, and operates mainly in the areas of robotics, power, heavy electrical equipment, and automation technology. In this example, the manager of Power Transformers division at ABB Norway reports to two supervisors. One, the global head of Power Transformers at ABB sitting in the global headquarters, and second, to the country head of ABB Norway sitting in the country headquarters. As this manager is responsible to both and derives support from both, his unit is both globally integrated and locally responsible. Now let us look at a table. It is taken from the article by Harzing, published in 2000. It is one of the recommended readings, so if you're interested in this topic, I would ask you to give it a look. This table shows how the three strategic orientations, multi-domestic, global, and transnational, influence the organizational or structural characteristics of a multinational firm. Let me explain it with the example of local responsiveness. So it has four elements: local production, local R&D, product modification, and adaptation of marketing efforts. As you can see, firms following multi-domestic strategy score high on each dimension. That is, they tend to localize production, conduct local R&D, modify products, and adapt their marketing efforts to suit the local demand conditions. Firms following global strategy, on the other hand, score low on each element. That means they don't localize production, and they don't conduct R&D locally, and don't adapt products and marketing efforts to suit the local conditions. Firms following transnational strategy may localize production and R&D as they create center of excellence, depending on subsidiaries' organization-specific and country-specific advantages. They modify downstream product and marketing activities to suit the local market conditions. This table shows the correlation between the structural elements and firm strategic orientation in Harzing's study. So multi-domestic strategy has a positive correlation with local production with the coefficient 0.44, whereas the global strategy is negatively correlated with the local production with the coefficient minus 0.28. Firms following transnational strategy also have a positive correlation with the local production. However, the coefficient size is only 0.07. So you see how the strategic orientation of a firm influences and fits with its organizational characteristics. So that is the end of this video lecture. Please do check the next video and help Flora in making decisions. She really needs your help. So see you on Friday and take care.